Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are watching this session from. We are at the 5th session of the GSDC CLO Summit, and we are so glad that everyone could be here. Thank you so much for your attendance during the other sessions as well, and thanks for being on this one as well. For the first time, a very warm welcome to you from GSDC team. My name is Setole, and I will be the moderator of this session. My colleague Intiranla is also on my co-host, so if you require any assistance during the session, please feel free to reach out to us on chat box. To begin with the session, just want to quickly give an appreciation to our partners, official media partners, that is World Press Media, World Press Hub. So they are our official media partner who have helped us through the publication of this event. So very appreciation to you guys. We move into the introduction of our Global Skill Development Council. We are an independent vendor neutral international credentialing and certification organization. So we have had 50,000 members find credibility in the top emerging and skill-based certifications. And we have over 60 plus certification portfolios. We are also proud to be accredited by ANSI, that is the American National Standards Institute, and ABICB, that is the Accreditation Board for International Certification Bodies. Our certifications are well curated and designed by our subject matter experts and advisory board, who are also academic affiliates from top universities like Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, MIT, Yale, and so on. We are also proud to be accredited by our authorized training partners who come various regions like the European regions, American region, the African, Latin, and Middle East regions. We have around 50 plus of these global partners, and so proud to be a part of them as well. A special thanks to the ATO supporters who helped us in sending out the message of this event. Thank you so much for out of your way to promote this event individually and for your company as well. For getting our promote of this CLO, we appreciate every one of you. Just want to introduce our speaker here, that is Adam Hopewell. Everyone has already been introduced. So we are so proud to have you, Adam. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Adam has worked in more than a dozen countries, enabling growth globally through leading collaborative and generative people and talent invocation for companies. And he is currently the head of global talent at Behaviox. We are so happy that you could be here. We will be having a 15-minute Q&A with him after the presentation. So please do stay with us until then. And yes, Aaron, you can just start away, share your screen and start away.
Alrighty, thank you for handing the virtual mic my way. So thank you, Setule, for the introduction, and thank you to the GSDC as well for inviting me to be one of their keynote speakers. Let me set up the tech so you can see my screen, gentle folk. Alrighty, we have that there.
Perfect.
I have the chat here. Okay. Alrighty. I think we're ready to rock and roll. Can we see the screen? Is everything clear? Audio coming through?
Yes, perfect.
Yep.
Everything's perfect.
Okay. All right then. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to one and all. And welcome to my keynote presentation on strategies and tactics to build an L&D ecosystem that creates excitement and drives engagement with your learning programs. Woohoo! Well, it's quite a mouthful, eh? And I've got a lot to share, so I hope you are all sitting and learning comfortably. And if so, let's begin. So, let's start, as all good learning sessions should, with some learning objectives shared. By the end of this session, you will have, number one, been shared insights, and I know you're not meant to read from PowerPoint slides, but I just want to read through these if it's okay. You'll have, number one, been shared insights into who your speaker is, where he has lived, who he has worked for, and most importantly, why he thinks today's content should be really great for you. Number two, you will have been transported across the continents and countries of the world through tales of strategies shared and tactics tested to create L&D excitement and drive L&D engagement. And number three, we will have attempted, hopefully, to share your ideas of how to apply and or activate some of the strategies and tactics that you will hear about as applied to your specific circumstances. Alrighty, so that's the objectives for today's session. As always, I tend to be rather ambitious in my objectives, but I hope that those are interesting and engaging for the audience we have here. Note one, this is the live session, and I like interactivity. So first of all, please try not to go to sleep. And if you do, at least keep yourself on mute. Number two, I have a lot of natural energy, and I want to share that with you along with my stories. But that means I want to be as interactive as possible. And can we start maybe by doing a little test of that? I can see chat here, and the chat's telling me the light is falling on the speaker face not visible. I'll lean in a little bit. The sunlight is beaming on a Washington morning through my windows here, but it will pass momentarily. But anyway, I want to try and test a little bit of interactivity. Can we have maybe a sampling of how, a percentage potentially, of how great you're feeling today? Typed into the chat just so I can get a feeling of how the audience is feeling. I would like to see at least 3% before we go on. So please just get your fingers ready. There's going to be a number of times where I'm going to ask you to tap, tap, tap. Go on, give me some percentages of how you're feeling. 100%, top of the world, 0%. Oh, the depths of depression. How are we feeling, gentlefolk? Okay, we have, Teresa's anxious. Okay, don't worry, Teresa, it's going to be fine. And you will be able to see the face being illuminated by the sun and other matters soon. Good, excited already. Moses is good, Patrick's excited. Rokia is good. All right, well, I only asked for 3 and I got plenty more. So thank you for keeping your fingers alive. Note number 2, I have very specific and measured input and output metrics for almost all the stories you're about to hear. But they belong to the companies involved. And so for confidentiality, specific details such as profits, as revenues returned, investments, return on investment, such like that will not be shared during this session. That information belongs to the companies involved. And note number three, the strategies and tactics shared do have overlaps, and they are just a sampling of the great work that we can do in learning and development. The idea for this session is that I will share some of those highlights and insights from a very global life in L&D. It's how you engage with those that will assess how successful this session really is. All right, and I've seen some more greats. I do love the word great. Great, good, and great. Thank you most kindly, gentlemen. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so you've invested time. It's one of our most important commodities, and you are all investing time being here with me this morning. I'd like to try and do some justification of why you should invest the time this morning and stay online and listen to me. In order to do that, I'm going to cover 3 core little areas, and we're going to start with who is Adam Hopewell? Well, I know I got a mini introduction already, and although originally from a very small island, only 1,000 people on my island, off a rather small island. So I come from Alderney, which is part of the UK Channel Islands. Over the last 20 years, I've had the privilege and honor of working and living on the ground in more than a dozen countries, enabling business growth globally through leading collaborative and generative people and talent innovation and development for companies and clients ranging from tiny little startups with big dreams all the way to Fortune 500 multinationals with billions of dollars in revenues. When it comes to thinking about people and professionals at the moment, what is one of the first things we tend to do? Well, I'd say that typically one of the first things we tend to do is to open up LinkedIn and look at profiles. So we just have a quick peeky in here. And hopefully this will also give you some overview and imagery regarding Adam as the presenter for you. So my education includes an MBA, studied at Halton, Boston, US. I'm an SPHR. Let's bring that back up. I'm an SPHR, Senior Professional in Human Resources, and a Global Talent Management Leader provided through collaboration with Wharton, with professional qualifications from some of the leading institutes in global talent management, HRD, and impact. I've worked for, my work has been recognized by governments, including those of the UAE, India, New Zealand, and the USA, and publications such as The Economist. I even have a little portfolio of awards, being selected as HR Game Changer of the Year by Workforce USA, a Talent Trailblazer by Chief Learning Officer USA, and a CIPD UK People Management Awards finalist. And most recently, I got the Best Remote Culture Manager of the Year award during the 2021 Pangeo Global Conference. Anything else we can see here that might be of interest to you? Summaries, of course. Yeah, this is from Pangeo. Speaker list there included Richard Branson. Nice to be on the same card as a speaker as eminent as Sir Richard Branson. Video content available, a little bit of professional background, education as you'd expect. And to a couple of the areas I'm really fond of when I look at LinkedIn profiles, skills. So I like the fact they've got a couple of skills there with a lot of endorsements for them, and recommendations, which I think are a key way to try and understand who a person is from a professional perspective, is what other people have got to say about them. You see, I've got 27 of those received, and I try to give 2 for every 1 I receive, so I've given 48 there. Yeah, that gives you a little bit of oversight as to who Adam is, hopefully. My greatest passions, essentially, are for serving the innovative development of organizations and talent communities by bringing to life visions of the future of work that truly drive business objectives, and for treasuring my family, who all live in the home of hope and love here in Springfield, just outside of Washington, D.C. That's a little on who I am. And I preambled this with the fact that I've lived all over the world. But where have I actually lived? I'd like to take us on a little journey. And as we use LinkedIn to have a little look at the personal profile or professional profile, I'm going to try another source of truth for this on the actual lived. And I'm also going to ask you to use your fingers again to tap. I'm going to give you a couple of cities, and I'd like to see if the audience is awake enough to be able to name the country of the city as we hop around the world. The first one's very easy. So as I said, I'm just based outside of Washington, D.C., and the country I hope is fairly easy for us to put in. Looking at chat, hey, Aropia. I hope I pronounced that right. Straight away, got the USA there. And let us see if I can just hop through one of my favorites in this. I do love the visual imagery that Google Earth provides. So here we are in Washington, D.C. All right, the second the hop that I'm going to show you to is to my island of Alderney. Can anyone say where the island, what country the island of Alderney is affiliated to? I'm going to hop. Anybody? Island of Alderney. Not the West Indies, but thank you, Aropia, for being quick with your fingers. All right, we're going to hop. Here we go. Up and out of DC, cross the oceans, and there we are. down to the island of Alderney. Okay, country being, anything in chat? Anything in chat? No? Okay. Well, the island of Alderney, yeah, thank you there, Sasha. Island off the UK. Yes. So indeed, the UK there. That's where I originally come from. One of my first professional assignments was in the city of Doha. And if we can say where the country for Doha, we will then hop there. Doha, Doha, ha, ha. Where are we going? Yeah, oh, no, not the UAE, but close. Absolutely, Yasmin. Yes, let's hop across all the way from the UK, Channel Islands, all the way there to Doha, okay, in Qatar. Next city, and this is only just a little sampling of the countries I've lived and worked in. Next city, an amazing place, would be Shanghai. Come on, now this is an easy one. And, I don't think Shanghai's in Rwanda, although it may have a Shanghai. Yes, Sasha's on the ball there with China. So let's just jump with our. And I don't think Sasha is there. Let's put Shanghai instead. Okay, let's hop. I love the zoom out. It gives us so much perspective on this wonderful planet that we have. And there she goes, rotating around. Okie dokie. I've got just two more that I'd like to do. One of those is another city I spent 2 years living in, working in, and that's the city of Hyderabad. Any input on where Hyderabad is? Oh, we got that one straight away. And let's get the spelling right so we can hop effectively up and out of China, all the way across, thank you, Moses, all the way there to the heart of India. And before I moved to Washington, D.C., I was working for a company based both out of the UAE and one other city, and that's Tehran. Okay. Any input on where our friend Tehran is? Oh, okay, no delays there. I'm sure Dr. Mohammed also was very familiar with that, but I lived, yes, essentially in Sadatabad in Tehran. Okay, so we've jumped around the little world a bit. Thank you for tapping away and joining me on that brief hop around the world. Next, let's move on. Who has he worked for? I think this is always an interesting foundation reflection. Experience includes serving as a country manager in China for EF Education Corporate, supporting rapid operational growth across 60 cities in China. Head of Group HR for the Goldstone Group in India, supporting the scaling of their global services. VP of Strategic HR for Abu Dhabi University, designing and delivering over $10 million in talent initiatives. Serving as a talent director for the Sadola Group, innovating people and systems across multi-billion US dollar Central Asian operations. Serving as the Global Talent Strategy Director for Resource Pro, architecting new talent tools and adding 2,000 new hires in a single year for that InsurTech and BPO company. And I currently serve as the head of global talent for Behaviox, a hyper-growth global fintech company headquartered in New York and Montreal, which has already won multiple awards for work in applied AI. Alrighty, so I hope you've now got a little feeling for who we're talking, who's going to be addressing you. And I did have a couple of logos. If anyone can guess which the logo of which company it is, let's see if those tap fingers can tap, tap, tap. Any ideas? Logo being... Logo being... Any ideas? One of the companies I've worked for? Nothing immediately in chat. Energy, it's in the energy sector. I'll give you that. No idea. Okay, this is the logo for Qatar Petroleum, where I worked in Doha. This is the one for EF Education, which was where I was based in China. I'm going to work a little faster through this because I've used a little too much time already. Abu Dhabi University, where we founded the Knowledge Group, the Abu Dhabi University Knowledge Group. Sabola, one of the largest FMCG chains companies throughout the Middle East, and their logo that is for my current organization, Behaviox. All right, hopefully I've engaged you a little bit and given some credibility to some of the things I'm about to tell you as I go into some of the stories from around the world. So we're going to start today with the study on strategies. And I'm going to really focus those strategies on the creation of engagement in learning programs. And just three of the portfolio items that I think are particularly relevant to this are A, prioritized competency modeling, B, analytical capability testing, and C, authentic content generation. And I'm going to dive into a couple of the companies and some of the specific experiences that have brought these elements to life to really create that ecosystem, providing engagement in learning programs. So, as we say, this is being told in almost narrative style. When we look at prioritized competency modeling, to deeply engage your learners, I believe you have to have a solid understanding of what knowledge, skills, and experience are baseline requirements for potential high performance in roles, and what observable technical competencies most move the needle in regards to measurable objective achievement. How to measure can also be seen as comparably important as to what to measure. And in that, I really look at having a simple 20-60-20 segmentation, which I'll go into in a little more detail. So let's go into a couple of the examples of how these learnings and application. In 2001, I was a younger man with less gray hair, of only 25, and I was working for the company Qatar Petroleum. I was brought in to help design learning content for large-scale categorization programs, which involves upskilling across the entire local population. I got to fly helicopters to work on rigs, which I thought was pretty cool. And I spent a lot of time interviewing technical workers to really get under the skin and understand the skills that made them really great at what they did. And I'd say the key takeaway that I'd like to share with you guys, you folks this morning on that is I truly believe in spending time and effort researching and writing the knowledge, skills, and experience, and prioritizing technical competencies for roles. I also believe strongly in using Bloom's taxonomy, constructing technical competencies using action, object, output, and how. And I'll give you an example of that. In my role at the moment, I implement new talent systems that drive prioritized productivity ratios using repeatable and scalable processes. Action, implement new. Object, talent systems. Output, that drive prioritized productivity ratios. How? Using repeatable and scalable processes. So first, my first piece of input and advice on that is that from 2 years working intensively with Qatar Petroleum, I found that this is a great foundation for any learning. The next experience I'd like to share was that in 2004, I was just 28 years old and working for EF Education. I was in Shanghai as their country manager, where I was brought to lead the expansion of corporate training operations across the country. So I got the privilege to explore gigantic cities from Harbin to Hong Kong, from Urumqi to Dalian. I spent a lot of my time creating systems to evaluate learning outcome delivery, using custom frameworks for client companies like FedEx China, supporting thousands of learners over hundreds of cities. And if I was to distill down just one simple takeaway for today's session, I'd say that simple evaluation frameworks that lean into outlier analysis, as long as you have enough data points, are always my favorite in search for competency exemplification and evaluation. So just to concrete that a little bit, when we look to see competency evaluation, what I'm really looking for is to be able to evaluate to a score of what I would classify as 0, which is not exemplified, or a clear no. A 3, which is partially exemplified. There's not enough data to really call if the competency is being fully exemplified. Or 5, a fully exemplified, clearly yes. And as we look into the data analysis around this, as we design the evaluation practices, I typically expect to see a 20-60-20 spread of the results across those. And this allows you to use outlier analysis to really show where capability is being found, and those data points allow you to move people or to use evaluation to clearly specify whether someone has achieved competency or not. So anyway, prioritized competency modeling not using laundry lists of hundreds of competencies, okay, really pushing and working with management and businesses in order to find out, okay, there's 30 competencies here you'd like to see, but which 5 really move the needle? Which 5 of these competencies, when expressed, when fully exemplified, really create performance in the workplace? Okay, so that's a little bit on prioritized competency modeling. Second point is from the strategy perspective, is on analytical capability testing. So analytical capability testing to me is a great way to deeply engage your learners, is by leaning into the data and designing programs that are able to analyze in action capability, the exemplification of that, to better establish and adjust learning models and objectives in almost real time based on their business impact, not just their happy sheets. For those of you I'm hoping that are familiar with the Kirkpatrick framework, that means constantly trying to drive this up from level 1 to level 4 or to level 5, if you consider that to be a reality. So where was I and what was I doing in this field? In 2009, I was 33 years old and I was working for Abu Dhabi University Knowledge Group in Abu Dhabi as vice president, where I was brought in to help design large-scale amortization programs. I got to attend Majlis meetings with some of the most senior sheikhs in the land, which was pretty cool. And I spent a lot of my time working on innovative leadership development programs with some very gifted colleagues. I'd say for today's session, my key takeaway to share is going to be around action learning projects. From my perspective, these are just the bee's knees for leadership development. Work was done, for example, while we were there, for a leading global telecoms player. I won't name, but a leading global telecoms player, to assess retention and application of leadership development programs. And the results originally that came in were shocking. The programs the company was spending millions of dollars a year on, retention rates of learning program outcomes that were delivered could typically be measured in weeks, and in some cases, days or even hours. And the application of new learning rates was in single digits percentage-wise. That's when I became such a champion for action learning projects. The design and organization of such requires a hell of a lot of work. I won't deny it does, especially to make a great one. But when great action learning project is created on the basis of a real business challenge opportunity, which feeds the relevance to applied, targeted, and structured learning, then the comparative results in terms of retention of knowledge and application of knowledge are simply night and day. Alrighty, I'll keep moving. And the next one we're going to be looking at is in 2011, at age 35, I was working for Goldstone in Hyderabad as a CHRO and divisional president, where I was brought to work on a multi-million-dollar aerospace university initiative. Strange enough, the second multi-million-dollar aerospace university initiative I'd worked on. And I often get asked how I describe India, and in a single word, and for such an amazing country, the only single word that starts to hint at it to me is the word alive. India is so alive with colors and smells and concepts and people. And what I worked on a lot for there was on the academic and institutional design for a new kind of professional university. And the takeaway that I'd like to share from that experience with the group today is regarding real-time comprehension testing. The work that we did supporting curriculum design for the newly proposed university in India was curriculum that was designed with the concept of real-time comprehension testing built in. So what is real-time comprehension testing, some may ask? The way that worked was that a professor would lecture or content would be shared in discrete chunks that were designed so that after those chunks, mini assessments of comprehension were used. Basically, people with tablets were able to have mini evaluation activities to gauge their understanding and comprehension of the materials being passed. And then live data from those tabs were fed directly to the front to the professor or facilitator, which allowed them to see indication of how much content had been understood, which allowed them to real-time adapt the learning they were delivering. I think being able to have that real-time feedback loops is incredibly valuable when we're addressing groups of individuals who may have different disparate levels of understanding and comprehension. Okay, so I've jumped a little through analytical capability testing. Let's go on to the third and final section of the strategies. And for this one, I'm going to look at authentic content generation. To deeply engage your learners, there is little better, in my opinion, than high levels of content relevance. And for work topic learning, that often comes best from truly authentic content. People who do the same work in the same or similar situations, showcasing their best advice. So for a couple of examples of work in this area, I would bring up Savola. So in 2014, I was 38 years old and working for Savola in Tehran and Dubai as their Central Asia Director for Talent and HR. I was brought in to solve for key talent attrition they were facing. And I got exposure to some of the amazing deep history of Iran and of Persia, and allowed for fascinating insights to the history of a really interesting region. And I got to spend a lot of time figuring out how best to make use of user-generated video for large-scale learning. So the takeaway I'd like to share is an initiative series that we created called the Ambassador Initiatives. And one example in particular would be the SBC, or Savola, the share company, Sales Ambassadors, which is an initiative that drove millions of dollars of attributed value by reducing time to performance for an extensive network of sales representatives. The program was a fabulous design, if I say so myself, and just to cover the basics of that design, it encouraged all existing sales reps to be part of a video creation competition to share their best 3 tips for being the best salespeople that they could be in their specific scenario. That video content was criteria shortlisted by sales trainers and managers, and then voted on by the entire network, who watched the shortlist together in their weekly morning huddles. This allowed for percolated, authentic content, creatively shared by the people who were doing the same work. And it resulted in things that we as learning designers would potentially never have thought to include. One of the main things that came out of that, for example, was how to maintain the attention of someone who you were going to, a customer that you were approaching in their shops, because Savola sells edible oil all around the country. How did they manage to create relationship and connection with people there? And just getting that advice from the people in the field who really did it, and then percolating that to the critical elements of that, and being voted on by the individuals, allowed a content relevance for the individuals involved that drove, as I say, millions of dollars of impact in reducing time to performance. And for the last of the many examples here, most recently, in 2021, 45 years old, working as I do now for my current company, Behaviors, based out of Washington, DC, as the head of global talent. I was brought into an amazing talent community of incredibly smart and dedicated people to work on further increasing their talent density. I've had now almost 3 years of exposure to an industry that uses applied AI, which is a technology that absolutely fascinates me. And I think for those of you who are following the field, we're seeing quantum exponential developments in this field, and how it affects us all going forward is something I think that is well worth us considering proactively. I recommend, if it fascinates you too, the trajectory of AI over the last year or so continues, is amazing. And as a data company, I've spent a lot of time on working on correlation coefficients, really assessing what activities drive on the job performance and talent analytics. But as they've encouraged the organization, and we're doing some rather revolutionary and evolutionary work at the moment, that's a little bit hush-hush. However, I can share a takeaway in an example of something I call a LEAP, which is a learner-engaged applied learning program. And I love LEAP programs almost as much as actual learning programs, because, again, it's about distilling learning down to its essence and seeing how that essence works best in the field. Let me tell you a little bit about the lead program we did at Behaviorx. It took 12 leaders through a 6-week, 2 hours per week module delivery section on leadership's essentials, essentially. So we had solid content on topics such as knowing yourself, leadership versus management, adaptability to change, also a lot of the classic leadership development program content, but ones that were selected specifically for the needs of this 12 leader group. Now, where it gets interesting is post the delivery section, we required pairs to present to the CTO their 3 key takeaways from those sessions. And more importantly than that, application. We required them to give examples of how they had really applied those takeaways in their work since the point of delivery of program. And then as a cohort, I asked them to further take all the pairs' 3 most important key learnings and distill it down as a cohort to the top 3 from a cohort perspective. And then to create a video in which they could share with the entire company their 3 key takeaways for leading at Behaviorx, but with real examples of success and failure in applying them. And I think it's when you bring those real examples to play, where someone can say, okay, so part of what I learned in adaptability to change was setting a vision for the organization, or setting a vision for my team members. But knowing that setting a vision is important is something I think we can all agree with. It's how we apply that. And by the participants sharing stories of, in order to apply that, what I did was I created a series of workshops in my team, or I had them do interactive sessions with me, or we have a weekly, how is our mission connected with what is changing around us at this time. It's about how we can make application work. And I think when you have authentic content that generates applied stories, it is one of the strongest strategies you can get for engagement with learning. Okie dokie. So we've covered 3 clusters of strategies with some high-level examples of places and where I personally picked these lessons or instilled them into myself, and how some of the examples of how I've tried to explore them. And in the Q&A, I'm happy to go into a little more detail as the audience will steer, hopefully. But having covered our strategies, let's now maybe dance in towards some tactics. And in the tactics area, I'm going to focus on tactics I believe create excitement in the learning programs being delivered. And for this, we've got an X, Y, and Z. We're going to have first a little look at X, some tactics I use in order to create cultures of learning within an organization. We're going to look a little bit at Y, peer-to-peer learning. Already a concept I've started to go over in the strategies, but some activities, some concrete actions you can take to encourage peer-to-peer learning potentially in your organizations. And Z, impactful learning. Like, how do we make sure that our learning has impact for the generative development of the people involved, of course, but also for the teams, for the divisions, for the departments, and for the entire organization that we're working with at those times. So for this, we're going to have a look at just 3 concepts or tactics, rather, for each of these that I think can be very helpful. Alrighty, so let's see. Cultures of learning, X. Cultures of learning. One of the most compelling ways to create sustainable excitement about learning, to me, is supporting and strengthening the creation of an institutional culture of learning. This is much easier said than it is done. But just for example, we're going to look at 3 ways that I try to instill a culture of learning inside my current organization. And the first one of these, and I believe a lot of the population here is from tech companies, so you may be using a number of these yourselves. I hope that you are, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of my experience in the use of these. First of these, and for this, fingers to the ready, hopefully those people aren't snoring in the audience at this time. I've left a couple of gaps. Can anyone make a guess at what the first image is about? It's an event that we run twice a year at Behaviorx. Can anyone fill the gaps? I'm going to be looking at our chat here. Chat. Come on, chat. Try and fill the gaps. What could this be? Something that can reinforce the culture of learning in an organization. The image is obviously related. Come on, chat. Don't leave me hanging here. Can anyone make a guess? Give me the first letter. Oh, yay! iPhone. iPhone, thank you most kindly. Yes, indeed. The first of the examples here to share is hackathons. Okay, hopefully that people are aware of the concept, but why in particular do I believe that hackathons are so valuable to instilling a culture of learning? We run 2 hackathons a year as a stop work event at Baybox, and the investment each time just in the stop work investment is over $100,000. What we do is these are primary technical challenges which are identified by employees in the weeks leading up to the hackathon and then focused on by varied teams, bringing together people from different departments, from different divisions to work together for 1 to 2 day sprints. To me, they strengthen the learning culture because they help generate an excitement about what can be done, when often our work intensity focuses more on what must be done. We've had some amazing solutions, concepts brought together, ready to be presented within our hackathons that we've brought to life inside our organization that simply wouldn't have occurred otherwise. And having the people of our organization, my organization, realize that they are going to have the opportunity on a biannual, on a twice a year basis to really focus on something that drives them, which could be a technical problem. We've also had people who wanted to express how global our company is and painted a mural across the walls, one of the biggest walls in our office in Montreal. So how they wanted to express themselves or how they wanted to solve for the problem that they decided to address was entirely in their own hands. And I love the creativity that brings and the culture of learning it engenders or helps engender. All right, the second one of these is, come on, chat. Yeah, don't leave me hanging. Come on, iPhone. You can do it again. You can do it again. Any ideas? What are we talking about here? Again, another biannual event or twice a year event that we do at Baybox. Marlene's on the ball. Thank you, Marlene. Yes, indeed. So this concept I'm talking about is demo days. We also, as I say, we run 2 demo days a year, and these are live demonstrations of new work done over the previous 6 months by teams across the company, tied to how they drive our mission, how they guide us, or how they are moving us towards our North Star. To me, these strengthen learning culture because they help generate an excitement about what has been done. They allow people to share and to reflect on some of the great work that's been done across the organization. And they have to be able to simplify to a certain extent so that people from different divisions and different departments can understand what it is that they've been working on and what it is they've been delivering. It also helps to create a rhythm of people having an expectation of something to be able to present in these demo days, something that other people will find inspiring and will show the value that they are adding as a division or as a team within a division. So to me, learning is a muscle in many ways, and building that muscle through reflection and sharing is one of the strongest ways to help broaden that culture within an organization. All right, and there's one more of these. Again, it's just a similar theme because these are all about building a culture, what I see as a culture of learning. Okay, and this may be a concept that not so many are familiar with. So any guesses as to what this could be? Let's say this one's not so typical. I've seen it in probably about half a dozen organizations, but it's one that I'm particularly fond of and did bring to BehaveOps. Hey, Pankaj. Okay, I hope that you do these as well. And this is what I call, or this concept is days of learning. What is a day of learning? Again, it's another stop work event, and being able to get the credibility from your senior leaders and from the rest of the leadership management team to have these kind of stop work events. As I say, they cost hundreds for a large organization or even a small organization. They can cost thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a whole team stopping to work for that. But it sends a signal to the people that the culture values learning as an integral part of what we do. So in Behaviorbox, for example, we run 2 days of learning a year, stop work event. And in these, any employee can, and there's a tacit expectation that they do, create a learning session about any topic they're passionate about and share interesting insights too. And then we market those programs across the company, and people choose freely as to which ones during the day of learning they'd like to attend or which ones they'd like to lead. We've had sessions on topics ranging from phonology to falconry. We've had topics deeply embedded within our work activities or very esoterically based in people's passions and interests, allowing people to teach and to share things they're passionate about, learning areas tied to the business and not tied to the business, really is one of the ways I think that I have brought to life that really strengthens learning culture by obvious investment in the passion for teaching and for learning. All right, so those are just three little tactics I use to help engender cultures of learning. Next, we're going to have a little look at another tactic cluster, which I think is vitally important, and that's peer-to-peer learning. So why peer-to-peer learning? As I've mentioned a number of times during this keynote, relevance to me is fundamental in generating assignment for learning. How excited can folks be learning something that will never be of use to them? And so in most organizations, things are done in a certain way. Making the most of peer-to-peer for work learning really increases both the relevance of content and the relevance of behavioral norms that are expressed to create success in an organization. And I've got three little examples of things that I do to help encourage cultures, peer-to-peer learning across organizations. So the first one of these, one of my backgrounds is in education, and I studied to a master's level equivalent, essentially in learning and training. And I especially at the time focused on language learning. And in language learning, it's one of the more innovative areas in teaching and learning. And there's been a number of models created over the years, which are used by various language teachers. And one of the ones that I found was Jeremy Harmer's work in 1998 on a model called ESA. ESA, as you can see on the screen, stands for engage, study, and activate. And this is, in fact, the whole of today's session is also designed around the engage, study, and activate methodology. When we're looking at peer-to-peer learning, one of the deficits or weak areas is that a lot of the people you are hoping can provide learning experience or learning content are not qualified trainers. They're never going to have studied these areas. But just by giving them a simple framework or a series of simple frameworks in our case, we allow them to basically use some of the best practices within learning and development. So essentially, we help train our managers and our individuals who wish to prefer learning and develop learning or deliver learning peer-to-peer in our organization with the ESA methodology. Looking at, so when they break down their design for their sessions, they're really looking at how am I engaging my learners? Okay, what is it I'm going to do as say to engage learners with the content I'm going to be delivering? What is the core study areas, the learning objectives or outcomes that I want to see achieved during that session? And as we are going to do today, fingers crossed, activation. How are we going to move that learning content into activation from the people involved? So ESA, I think, is an incredibly powerful paradigm or model used, and it's something that I would teach across our organizations to help our managers and employees better deliver learning. The second of these concepts is something Adam Hopewell, I think, 2014 maybe, but it's a concept I found. It's going to sound so ridiculously simple, but it's also incredibly, I found it to be so incredibly powerful. The concept is called shine and rain, as you can see from the image here. The reason I came up with this concept is that I found most employees really struggle to share a healthy mix of achievements and challenges. What we do is work with teams across an organization, setting this as part of their weekly cadence of weekly meetings, to use this shine and rain concept inside those weekly meetings. This means that individuals and teams are expected to be able to provide in the period upcoming to the meeting, so if it's on a weekly meeting, in that last week, shine. What is it that they've achieved that they're really proud about, that they'd like to share with their peers? And rain. What is it that's been holding them back? What is the challenges they've been facing? And that there's an expectation that members, participants of those meetings will be sharing those things, means they need to prepare them in advance. In fact, in some organizations, we've had these locked down and put into spreadsheets to do trend analysis across not only single teams, but across entire organizations to see where the common areas of achievement are, to see where the common areas of challenges are. And as I stress as we introduce this topic to a number of people, we always require both shine and rain. If you only have shine, you end up with a desert. If you only have rain, you end up with a swamp. It's when you have shine and rain that you create a verdant territory. And really encouraging and giving people a tool or a structure and a framework in which to be able to be expected to share their shine points and their rain points and allow those to be openly discussed amongst their teams really has been an incredibly powerful tool that I've brought now to half a dozen organizations and seen it flourish within them. I say sometimes the most powerful ideas don't even need to be that complex. And the third of the ideas here that I'd like to share is on applied learning. And again, you hear Adam beat the drum of applied learning, but I think like it's Stephen Covey's words that probably come out to me on this back in '88. To learn and not to do is really not to learn. To know and not to do is really not to know. And I think that really focusing on how we engender the application of learning is probably one of the most important things that we can do to make sure that these sessions we've run for learning and development, whether they be micro learning or be e-learning courses or be forums or be seminars, whatever the modality is, how are people going to be encouraged to actually activate that learning within their lives and their work scenarios post the learning? So yes, encouraging all of you to keep always in mind how application of learning will occur post delivery. All right, little time check. Yeah, we seem to be okay at this point. So I'm going to go into the last of these, which is Z, impactful learning. There may be a number of you who are going to challenge me on this, but from all my experience around the world, I would say learning impact is measurable. But to measure it requires more than a little learning, teaching, and changing. But when you can measure it and provide metrics that really matter to a business or an organization, proving that learning impact is a great way to sustain excitement around learning programs. In order to do that, just a couple of little tactics I'm going to recommend here. The first of which is the first of the images here. Speak the language of your business. Okay, know its terminology, know its acronyms, know what drives its margins, know who its competitors are. When learning and development professionals sometimes, and I could be as guilty of any one of this, get under our own hood and really just lose ourselves in the technicalities and the wonder of what we can do, sometimes we lose touch with what the actual business or the organization real requirements are. To be impactful, you've got to understand that business. It took me the best part of a year and a half to really understand the fundamentals of the Savola fast-moving consumer goods business. But once I got to that point, and I consciously was striving to learn regularly on that, driving into it in conversations with other business leaders, with the CEO, in order to really understand what the margin drivers were, what the key pressures were from a business or organizational perspective. That allowed the program design that my L&D teams led at that point to be so much more impactful, and for me to be able to report back on those in ways that made sense to both the senior executives, the rest of the senior executive team, and even the board. The second point is regarding attaching attributed value. Now, a lot of people say, okay, well, we're going to provide this, for example, training and learning and development program for the salespeople. And we've seen that sales this year have increased after our training program by 50%. We've seen 50% growth on that. But learning and development professionals tend to be very reticent about, or overly ambitious in claiming how much of that is the impact of their work. The market changes, the dynamics of the market change. How much can be attributed of that 50% increase in sales revenues, for example? How much can be attributed realistically to the programs that you've delivered or you've worked on and provided to the organization? To me, one of the simplest ways to work on this is to bring that concept to an executive leadership team and to really break down, okay, so we've seen a 50% increase. What are the key attributing factors towards that? So yes, there's been an increase in market, in this market and that market that is in market demand. So that's going to have driven a percentage of that for sure. Roughly, we're going to say that's going to be head of sales. How much percentage? Okay, you're going to put down that that's going to affect it by 40% of the 50% impact we've seen. Okay, what other impacts have we seen or other elements have impacted that? And together we work down a list to clarify what could have driven that increase or that impact, and then how much the learning programs could be attributed, how much of the value can be attributed to the learning programs. And for example, in one of the organizations I worked in, where we saw in a single year, the sales development saw a $16 million growth. We were able to basically break that down into the elements there, and the executive team agreed that the learning and development programs were roughly could be attributed approximately $4 million of the dollars of impact that was provided there. So trying to find a way to attribute the value there. Is that a science? No, but we don't necessarily need specific science there. A lot of what we are doing here is about the perceived impact. And when an executive team can agree that yes, we are willing to attribute 25% of the learning and development programs, then you can start to lock down what you see as the actual impact in dollar terms, which is incredibly powerful. And the last thing on impactful learning, hopefully some of you, Cranfield logo. I know, not as far as I know. I think Moses, maybe you're the one on the right here. I'm actually going to challenge anybody here not to know what that logo is. Moses, you're rock and roll, sir. Okay, exactly. ChatGPT. I work in applied AI. I spend dozens of hours since the beginning of this year, maybe 50 hours reading and watching content on the developments in the field. And there are some amazingly interesting factors. If those of you who haven't yet had a chance to play, and my first recommendation is not to use ChatGPT, but to play with ChatGPT or any other large language model that you can get exposure to. The technology is fascinating at this point and can prepare. I could have actually asked it to write my keynote today, and it wouldn't have done a terrible job at it. Think about it when you do play with something like a ChatGPT. In many ways, even though this is based on transformer technology, which is pretty old at this point, but as a generative learning large language model, it's essentially still in its infancy in many ways. This is almost like the gaga of a baby, but this baby is growing up incredibly quickly. We're talking, it's growing in human terms of years, in equivalency in months. So anyway, part of my last point here is essentially preparing for and embracing the future, but still being as wary and cautious of fads as possible. I am immensely engaged with my industry, and as it steps forward with what could be societally reforming technologies of a type and caliber that I believe has never been experienced by humankind before. At its very least, applied AI received billions of US dollars in investments already last year, and seeing glimpses of what is under the hood in the next generation of large language models, things like the chirping of the sparrow from Google and GPT-4. Most people don't even know what GPT stands for, like generative pre-trained model. Anyway, so really trying to get under the understanding of this, what the developments in this area are going to have massive impacts on learning and development, and in fact on the world of work as a whole. So recommendation here to stay impactful. Sometimes I've got a concept I call it the sails of today. And by sails of today, I'm talking about a ship with sails. Okay, sometimes the things that most drive you forward today can become what are the anchors of tomorrow, the things that are going to hold you back. Because those are shown things that you get comfortable with. They're shown to have success. but things change so rapidly at times, and especially at these times, they're changing so rapidly that I strongly recommend that you don't get too addicted to the sales of success that you've had in the past, but you keep constantly looking to see, is that still a methodology or an approach or a content that's driving forward our business and our business activity or organizational activity? Or is it something that's actually starting to become an anchor, something that's tying us to the past more than it is to the future? So those are just a couple of little mental tactics, maybe, around bringing excitement to your learning programs. All right, so as you'll have seen, one of the things that we talked about is the ESA model. And in my own presentation here today, I've been using the ESA model. I started with the introduction to speaker, to hopefully traveling around the world, to hopefully get some engagement as to why this could be important or interesting for you. We then looked at the study section, looking at some of the tactics, clusters of tactics and of strategies. And I'm actually going to try to activate the group here because you'll all be working on interesting, hopefully interesting, wonderful projects with challenging circumstances, undoubtedly. But what I'd like to try and challenge you to do, okay, is to choose any one of those strategies or tactics shared. And I've summarized them down here in a table. So strategies A, B, and C, or tactics X, Y, Z, or even the subdivisions of those, X1, X2, X3. I'd like you to think about those and explore it with me live here in this session. What I'd like you to be considering is like choose one of those and then be able to just talk around why is that a strategy or tactic that you think is aligned to your business culture or future needs. Potentially which stakeholders within your organization would that strategy or tactic most impact, and how could that be measured, by how much? And when could you possibly activate that strategy or tactic? What would you need to be your first steps? All right, so this is more than just tapping, gentlefolk. I'm going to ask our audience out here if someone is willing to volunteer to speak out, to actually tell the rest of the group, to interact and try to apply, hopefully, some of the learning or some of the interest factors that I brought to you today. If anyone is brave enough to put into chat that they would like to come off mute and interact, then I would love it to at least do one of these, or if we have time, I think maybe more. So amongst the general populace here, is anyone bold and brave enough to step up and to consider any of these strategies and tactics and their application for their organization?
If anyone wants to participate, they can definitely raise their hands and we can unmute you. So please feel free to do that.
No one's going to volunteer. I'm just going to sit here and drink my coffee for a moment. Like, come on, someone be bold and brave. Who's been giving me a lot of input so far on these on the chat side of things? Sasha's been there. Has a fair
There is
there. Oh, have we got someone who's willing to step forward?
There is a.
Oh, Moses has got his hand in
There's
the
a
air.
raised hand there. I'll just unmute. Yes.
Rock and roll, Moses.
Feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi,
Moses.
Okay, thanks so much. And sincerely, this is one of the most impactful sessions I've been opportune to sit in since the conference started. You actually spoke, you actually extend, and you provided depth into a lot of learning and development tactics. I'm particularly, interested in the hackathons and the demo days. I think that will actually help in driving deeper the culture of learning, will excite the employees, and then maybe and as an addition, we'll also add some recognition packages to anybody who volunteers to any of these. So for me, I think it's the hackathon and the demo days that I will take away from here and trying to implement in my company. Thanks.
All right. Hey, Moses, no, hey, this is interactive, mate. You're not just going to say your piece. We're going to have a little conversation on this. So why are hackathons or demo days, why do you think they're particularly relevant to your business culture or the future needs of your organization? Do you work in a technology organization or?
I work in consumer goods.
Okay.
Yeah. So I believe that it will actually bring, we have a lot of, how do I call it now? Subject matter experts. People are actually good, but usually we engage them for trainings, bringing up and holding new joiners and young managers and so on. So I believe creating this hackathon will actually help what we call the gamification. They will come out of their shells. These subject matter experts will actually come out of their shells to actually prove to a wider audience now the kind of stuff they are made of. And because they are doing that, it will have a ripple effect on others. Every other person will want to also will push others to learn, to also study deeper, and then want to come out in an hackathon day to also participate.
Absolutely. We love it, Moses. Yeah, and I totally agree with you on the subject matter experts. As I say, at the moment, I work in a technology company, and we have some world-leading talent in machine learning, in DevOps, in SRE fields, but getting them originally to start to share some of the depth of their knowledge with other people, to get them to apply that in more creative ways. They tended to be rather introverted, but over the last 3 years of really building these into the culture and the cadence of the organization. I've seen members of my organization who I thought couldn't say boo to a mouse speak out and really explain, present their hackathon ideas, like say, okay, this is what I'm trying to solve for. Okay, and this is what we've done over the last 2 days to really look at the code that we've developed, or look at the process that we're proposing that we go forward with. And I think that it can really help to bring out of their shell, especially people who are more practical. Learning and development specialists can be somewhat wordy at times, can be somewhat conceptual at times, but really helping to bring those people who are more practical into the learning and development fold, I found has been incredibly effective. So you could see that your SME stakeholders could be impacted. How much? Okay, that's something to consider. But from your perspective, to actually bring a hackathon to life, as I mentioned, it's a significant investment, especially if you're going to do a stop work day. We also, for our hackathons, for there are prizes involved for those hackathons that actually move forward and are taken to life. And we always try to make sure that at least a couple of the projects that are presented are moved to the next stage. So it's not just about what they're presenting in the first few days. If you want a series of hackathons to be done, then you want to have the best ones that are voted by the populace who watches them, really to be brought into action, into life, because that's where people think next time, oh yeah, maybe my idea not only will be presented and created in the hackathon, but it will actually be implemented in the organization, which is a massive force driver there. But you need to get organizational buy-in. You need to get a stop work event for at least a divisional. Sometimes you don't need to go whole company. You could go at a departmental level or even a divisional level. You can make this work. It works best, in my opinion, at a departmental level or a company level. But do you have any ideas? What could be a first step? What practical step could you take, Moses, to bring this to life?
Okay, I think the first is to understand this concept deeper and then apply it to my own context in terms of the company. Of course, I have a day in mind. Fridays are usually meeting-free days. So I think leadership can be engaged to actually allow this kind of program to hold on a Friday. So the idea is to bring, have a proposal, present a proposal to leadership and get it approved. And then I can now work with my team on how to actually, bring this to life.
Okay, absolutely. All right, and any little advice I can give you on that? First, I love the fact you started with, okay, first you need to understand the concept better and think through, maybe see examples. There are examples online, like there are different organizations model these in different ways. Yes, get under the skin of that. If that's something you're seriously going to think you can bring to your organization, don't just listen to Adam today, but get your research done. Maybe even ask ChatGPT, what makes for a great hackathon inside an FMCG company? Or for example, but yes, starting with research is incredibly important. I'd also say that when you're going to present to your leadership team, if there's any way that you can get some support from potentially maybe even middle managers, you've given some straw test, some poll testing, you've brought this concept up with a number of some of your business leaders already, just as a proposed concept, just to see that you can get support. That it's not just the L&D function or yourself speaking about this, but that there's some excitement about this as a concept and the value it can bring to an organization.
Okay.
I often see when we do organizational change that people either start from a top-down model. Well, we've got dozens of organizational change models for a start, ADKAR, Prosky, but I find in reality terms there tends to be top-down. Some people more inventively try bottom-up. I find the thing that works probably the best in my experience is a middle out. Some people may recognize that concept from Silicon Valley.
I think it's new to me.
Okay, but this means starting with the middle managers to get support for concept at that level. Make sure that they've been able to coordinate, to validity test, to sanity check that this would work with their people. Because we could dream up some of the most amazing dreams, but if the reality test means that it can't possibly be brought to life because of factor X, Y, and Z, and you don't know that, and you present the concept to your leadership team, then basically you've got egg on your face. So really working with that middle management team, I find, so that you can gain the credibility to be able and have sanity checked enough to be able to present up, and also that they've already been able to think about the operational impact such things would have down from that. So there's just a little bit of ideas that are about that, your next steps. But Moses, I hope you pull that off, sir. My fingers are crossed for you. Okay.
Thanks so much. I will update you.
Cool as school. Alrighty. How are we doing on time? Okay, we've only got about 15 minutes left. Options are we can go to Q&A, broad Q&A, or we could do another one of these activate sessions if anyone else wants to step up for that. The choice is yours. Let's see what chat's got to say. Would they prefer, got someone going to volunteer and activate, or would you prefer general Q&A? Bikash.
Yes, there's another hand here.
Yay! Go Bikash. Hi.
Hey, hi. Good morning. So one of the tactics we use in our industry is the simulator-based model, which really helps us because being into in the aviation industry. So when we look into a simulator kind of a program for our employees, and the reflection is quite good. So along with the hackathon and the demos. So that is what one more added input from my end, that if your industry and organization walks into a simulator kind of a setup, I think that is very quick and easy for employees to understand on the job program.
Can you give us a little more details? Are you talking on simulation, yeah?
Yeah, simulator based programs. So if you talk about, a kind of a domain into an aviation kind of we have a cockpit, a simulator cockpit in our organization where we train our engineers. We train our engineers on that, and for a domain knowledge purpose. So they are not the pilot or co-pilot so far, but as walk into the aviation industry, they should understand what is the landing concept, what is the flight management concept works out. So all this information really helps employees when they undergo such kind of a simulator-based programs, which we designed for our employees, for a certain people, not to all the engineers or not to all the tech people in the org.
Yeah, Bikash, I've worked in aviation myself. I was part of Dubai Aerospace Enterprise at one point. I've worked with Air India in India. I've been to their simulation centers in Hyderabad. I've used the simulators, the flight simulators. Man, I've been to Embry-Riddle and I've used the flight simulators there as well. I used to directly report to the former president of Embry-Riddle. So you'll know all about that from an aviation perspective. Simulation, when you can get it to work, is fabulous, man. It's like, especially when it's technology driven, where you can actually get so much specific data. And in a in a high risk or a high impact area like flights, for example, being able to do those simulations is absolutely essential. So yeah, any time that either the practicalities or the situation allows simulation to be used, it's fabulous. I just don't see it used as often because the practicalities of delivery outside of specific industries like aviation. I don't see it used that typically across broader industries. But if your industry can use it, then
Yeah,
leaning
it's a
heavily
huge
into it.
investment as
Wonderful.
well.
Man,
Agree, Adam. It's a huge investment also for the organizations.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so that was basically adding an addition. That's more general Q&A than adding, choosing one of these. But thank you, Vikash. Any other follow-up or any other thing else I can share with you at this point?